Today I'm joined with Georgina from Kelly Lawyers, and we met through our networking connections in Ascot. So her business is based in Ascot, and so is ours. And today we're going to talk about some big changes that some women go through when they may need support going through a divorce, for example. So what we wanted to do is firstly introduce Georgina. So Georgina, if you don't mind telling us a bit about you, where you're based and the types of clients that you help.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me today, Patricia. So we're a boutique firm located in Ascot on Racecourse Road. We're a general practice offering services in family law, wills and estates, commercial litigation, property and conveyancing. So we really cover all bases, but my practice focuses on family law and wills and estates. So in terms of today's discussion, really pleased to be talking about family law and the impact for women in the event of separation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. It's really exciting. It's a tough topic, obviously, when people are going through a divorce. It's always very, very difficult, and there's a lot of emotions. And we've been involved in helping a lot of our clients that are referred to us go through that. But how do people know if they need a divorce lawyer, and what will be your role as their lawyer?
Yeah, so in Australia, family lawyers cover all aspects of family law. So that's parenting, property, divorce, and financial agreements. And so in terms of today's discussion, we're talking about divorce, but also property settlements. And those two things are separate. You can have a divorce without a property settlement, and you can have a property settlement without actually getting divorced. So there's some important time limits and things to keep in mind, which we'll briefly touch on today. But knowing when you need a lawyer to assist with a family law matter, really that can start even before you have separated. If you're thinking about separation and what that might look like for your circumstances, we would recommend getting advice at an early stage, even if it goes nowhere. So we can be that sounding board to talk about these things that might be worrying someone who's considering separation. And then, you know, often we have clients who we might meet with, and then down the track they do decide that separation is the path that they're going to go down. And so then we might pick it up again in terms of providing more firm advice and a strategy for moving forward.
Yeah, and you've touched on a few things there that are important to know. So how long do you need to be separated before you can apply for a divorce?
So the time limit in terms of applying for a divorce is a 12-month separation period. You do have to either be able to tell the court that you've been separated for 12 months or that you've been living under the one roof while separated. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be living separately and apart for 12 months, but you do have to have regarded the relationship as over for 12 months. And if you have been living together during that period, be able to tell the court the circumstances surrounding that before the court will look to grant an order of divorce.
Okay. And when do you normally recommend your clients seek financial advice?
Yeah, so that's a really important component of the advice that we give our clients, that they really do need to have another professional supporting them through the separation. And so we would recommend, again, at a very early stage to our clients for them to link up with a financial advisor and then to rely on that advice all the way along the negotiation process in terms of a property settlement more specifically. There's often a mediation process that takes place even before court proceedings are even thought about. And so with the offers thrown back and forward about how parties might divide the property pool, clients really need to understand the implications of any offers of settlement that they make or that they receive and they might be considering accepting, because it can have huge impacts on their financial future depending on the assets and things that they receive in the settlement.
Yeah, we've had a lot of experience with that, and sometimes clients come and see us at the end or after, and sometimes they come and see us at the beginning. And we've certainly found that if they come and see us at the beginning, it's such a better process because we can help them through those decisions and making sure that they're going to be okay, looking at their options, and sometimes being able to actually get to an agreement sooner rather than later, knowing you're going to be okay, is for everybody's best interest, right? So that's where we can come in and play a supporting role in that case. And then we often find that the ongoing advice is then needed around what do they do with the assets that they then have. And oftentimes, especially if we're talking about a divorce between the husband and the wife. Sometimes the wife may not have been the main breadwinner, so she may not have had as much involvement with the finances. It's not always the case, that there's a lot of very successful, driven women out there, but sometimes we find that female clients going through that like to see female advisors and female lawyers to help them through that process. So it's good to know that your firm also puts a lot of emphasis on that.
Yeah,
all right, now.
Oh, sorry to interrupt,
Go
but
on.
I'll just add that as well. I mean, it is one of those life events, I suppose, which results in parties having a lump sum payment that they might not have ever had to deal with or think about before. It could be the result of selling the family home and splitting the net sale proceeds between the parties. And so I think it's really important, even at the end, as you say, the end of an agreement, and the parties are going their separate ways, they've now suddenly got these assets, in their own name that they have full autonomy over. And it's important to take stock at that point and make sure that it's setting them up for the best financial future.
Yeah, exactly. Now, how are assets normally divided in a divorce settlement? And I know that this is a bit of a Pandora's box, but what guidelines can you give us? And I should have said at the beginning of the vlog today, but it will be in all our notes. This is obviously all general advice today. There's a lot to consider. You need to go and seek professional advice. But in general terms, Georgina, how would that normally happen?
Yeah, so the court has a well-established framework for determining a property settlement, and it takes into account those things you were mentioning earlier about parties who might not have had the higher earning capacity during the relationship, might have played more of a role as primary carer of the children or in the homemaker capacity. And so all of those things are taken into account. But generally, the first step is to identify what is actually available for division, what assets and liabilities do each party have. And then we look at things like contributions. Has one party made a significant financial contribution, like an inheritance or a lump sum windfall, things like that, that would need to be taken into account in order to achieve a just and equitable property settlement, and things like future needs. So if one party does have a higher earning capacity, taking that into account for the future, if one party has a health condition to be aware of, or if one party is going to play that primary carer role into the future as well. So I suppose clients can be assured that the family court is very aware of all of those considerations and wants a just and equitable outcome for all parties. And so that's why it's important to get that advice at an early stage, so that you're not diminishing what you're entitled to under the Family Law Act.
Yeah, definitely very important. And we see that a lot, transitioning from a dual income household to a single income can be really, really challenging. And some people may have to reintroduce themselves into the workforce, or that maybe they were working part-time before, now they need to work full-time. So how can these things be factored into that settlement? So in terms of, spousal maintenance, and can you just walk us through some of those things that we need to consider?
Yeah, so spouse maintenance is one of those mechanisms that's available to parties to even the playing field, so to speak. If you've got one party who has an income which exceeds their expenses, and one party whose income is not quite enough to meet their weekly needs. So only in that situation could a spousal maintenance order potentially be made for one party to pay the other some spouse maintenance. And usually that's an interim solution for things like allowing a party to retrain or go back and do some study, so that they can then re-enter the workforce and increase their earning capacity from there.
Okay. Yeah. Now, so usually that wouldn't be a long-term thing. It's usually just a transitioning tool, is it?
Yeah, it is. And in a final property settlement, sometimes spouse maintenance can be negotiated as a lump sum payment. But yes, generally it is more of an interim measure until that property settlement is negotiated.
Oh, yeah. And what about child support? I know we didn't talk about this last time we spoke, but what are the things that I know there's some formulas, and but it can be quite complicated. What are the main things that people should be aware of?
Yeah, child support is a really complicated area, even for family lawyers. It's an area that is really dependent on each party's specific circumstances, but it's also heavily legislated in its own right. There's a child support agency who do collection of child support as assessed on behalf of parties. So it's important to get specific advice about child support from a lawyer, but also to do your research in terms of the calculators online that are available from Services Australia. To be informed about those types of things. And it's important, I guess, from a financial perspective to ensure that your tax returns are up to date and that you're reporting accurately in terms of your income to Services Australia.
Very good. And just wrapping up, the other thing that obviously clients going through a divorce need to consider is their estate planning affairs. There's a lot of changes that they're going through, so they will definitely need to update their estate planning documents, reflect on what their wishes might be going forward. I know you also provide advice when it comes to estate planning. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, as you know, any major life event is a trigger for a review of your estate planning, what you've got in place for that. But particularly with divorce, there are some legal considerations in terms of if you have a former spouse named as an executor or beneficiary, you need to ensure that the documents are updated to reflect who you wish to replace in those capacities. But particularly in relation to super, it's really important that you update your information in terms of beneficiaries for your super once you've reached an agreement with your spouse about a property settlement.
Yeah, and that's why we love working with estate planning lawyers and referring our clients, because superannuation beneficiary nomination is a very important document, and it often gets forgotten about and not updated. And there's also tax consequences and tax implications that you need to be aware of. There may be different ways that you can structure your will to make sure that you address all of those things and have the best outcome from a tax perspective as well. So taking that into account is really important. So, updating your wills with a financial planner, overseeing the process and helping the client facilitate that so that we also get the best outcome for the client and the beneficiary. So a lot to consider there, as we've noted. Thank you so much for your time today, Georgina. We obviously will put in the bio how to contact you and where to find you for anyone interested to reach out. And just wrapping up, as we said before, this is all general advice. There's a lot to consider. So if you're going through a divorce, make sure you seek professional advice from lawyers, financial planners, and estate planning specialists and others. But thanks again today, Georgina, and I'll chat to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Patricia.